I would love to introduce you all to our first speaker, the lovely Angeline Boulley. Angeline is an enrolled member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. She's a storyteller who writes about her Ojibwe community in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. She was selected as an emerging young adult writer in the 2019 We Need Diverse Books mentorship program and chosen to attend the 2019 Tin House YA Writers Workshop. As a former director of the Office of Indian Education at the U.S. Department of Education, she focused on improving education of Native American students at the tribal, state, regional, and national levels. She lives and works in the Washington, D.C. area, but her home will always be Sugar Island. Firekeeper's Daughter is her debut novel, and it hit shelves in winter 21. Angeline, the floor is yours.
Buju Anin, Angeline Boulley Nadishnakas, Makwadodam, Bawating and Donjaba, Chimagwech. Hello everyone, my name is Angeline Boulley. I'm Bear Clan from Sugar Island. Miigwech, thank you for this opportunity to welcome you to the Macmillan Children's Publishing Group Blogger Party. I know how passionate you all are about books, and I appreciate the vital role that you play in the bookish community. A little about me. I was raised on stories. My father is a traditional firekeeper who tells stories while tending ceremonial fires at our tribe's spiritual events. And firekeepers ensure that protocols are followed around the fire. Ceremonial fires are different than a campfire that you have marshmallows at. You don't gossip or say mean things around a ceremonial fire because that smoke is carrying prayers to Creator. So you make sure that only good thoughts feed that fire. And my dad would tell stories as he tended the fire all night long. And story is how we share what it means to be Anishinaabe. Knowledge is power. Being a native storyteller means recognizing the immense responsibility not only to share cultural knowledge, but more importantly, when not to, when to draw that curtain, because there are certain things that should not be shared outside of our community. So I write to preserve and I edit to protect. Growing up, I enjoyed mysteries and thrillers. You know, Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, Dana Girl Mysteries. But there was always something missing in that none of the books I read reflected my identity, which was, you know, I have a Native father and a non-Native mother. So to be seen as a Nishkwezan, an Ojibwe girl, as the hero in a story, and that what I knew about my culture and my community might be my greatest strength, well, that would have been a revelation. 11 years ago, I decided to write the story I wished for as a teen. My debut, Firekeeper's Daughter, was acquired at auction by Henry Holt Books for Young Readers. 18-year-old Donis witnesses the murder of a loved one. And she must use her science geekery and knowledge about her Ojibwe culture to protect her tribal community before she loses anyone else. I am so honored to share her story with you. Get ready to meet Donis, science whiz, hockey superstar, and Firekeeper's Daughter, coming winter 2021. Miigwech, and thank you. Have a wonderful blogger party.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Angeline. That was an amazing way to kick things off. Well, now I'm excited to introduce our second guest author, Amanda McCrina. Amanda was homeschooled through high school and graduated from the University of West Georgia with a BA in History and Political Science. For 3 years, she taught high school English and government at an international school in Madrid, Spain, and is now a bookseller in Franklin, Tennessee. She is the author of The Blood Oath duology and Traitor, an exciting historical thriller hitting shelves at the end of August. Amanda, take it away.
Thank you, Morgan. First of all, I just want to say I'm so excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity to talk a little bit about Traitor. I'm also a little nervous because I haven't given a speech since freshman comm class, so bear with me. I do want to start out by giving a big thank you to you, the book blogging community, for all the work you do. I want to mention that back in February, we coordinated with a bunch of bloggers and bookstagrammers for Traitor's cover reveal, and that was just incredible. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to work with a community of such passionate book lovers. About Traitor, even now, I'm wondering, if we really need another World War II story. As a bookseller, I know that's a pretty crowded market. But at the same time, I think there's still so many stories about this history that can be told. And every author who tells a World War II story is bringing their own unique perspective to it, even if the setting is the same. And I think there's still so many neglected corners of World War II history that need to be explored, maybe from voices that have been silenced until now, stories that haven't had the chance to be told. And I think with the publishing landscape being more diverse than ever, this is exactly the time for more World War II stories. I'm thankful for authors like Ruta Sepetys, Sherry Smith, Andrew Fukuda, and others who are broadening our idea of what a World War II story can be or what it can do. Traitor is a pretty personal story for me for a couple different reasons. I wrote the original draft back in high school, actually. It looked a little bit different then, but it was the first serious piece of fiction that I ever finished, that I ever completed. It was just a short story at that point, so again, it looked a little bit different from the way it looks now, but the core of the story has been the same throughout. It's about a young Soviet conscript who's half Polish and half Ukrainian, grappling with his role and his identity in the middle of a brutal ethnic conflict on the Eastern Front of World War II. My family has Polish roots, and I'm so excited to be able to tell a story about the Polish experience, which I think is one of those neglected corners of World War II history. The Eastern Front in general, and Poland specifically, I think is still largely uncharted. And there's a couple different reasons for that. Part of it is so much of that history was kind of lost right after the war, with the Soviet Union kind of sealing everything away in archives, and so now that information, that knowledge is only recently coming back into kind of the public mindset. And the other reason I think is a lot of it is really tricky, kind of controversial history, difficult history, that continues to drive debates about different people's roles in the war and different responsibilities that they had during the war. And it sometimes feels like you're kind of trying to walk a minefield telling these stories. But one thing that struck me in particular when I was doing preliminary research, working through early drafts, came from one of my sources, historian Catherine Meredale, who made this point that really surprised me. She mentioned that thousands of ethnic Poles, including those living inside the Soviet Union and then from Poland itself after the Soviet Union invaded Poland in 1939, thousands of Poles ended up as conscripts in the Soviet army. And again, that was really surprising because throughout the 1930s, the Soviet Union had kind of carried out this brutal repression campaign against Poles, and had actually massacred over 20,000 Polish POWs right after the start of World War II. So knowing that, I kind of got fixated on this idea of what those Polish conscripts in the Soviet army must have been thinking and feeling and experiencing, and how conflicted a lot of them must have been about their role and their allegiance. And that's something I really wanted to explore through my main character, Tolya, who again is half Polish. Traitor's a thriller, but I think of it first and foremost as a character-driven story. And those questions of identity and loyalty and belonging are so important throughout the story. And my hope is that Traitor resonates with readers who are asking those same questions today. And again, I'm so excited to work with the book blogging community to get Traitor into young readers' hands. So I just want to say thank you again for all that you do, and thank you for having me.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you so much again to Angeline. You two were amazing. And feel free to head out and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thank you both so much for coming. I am so excited to introduce all of you guys to our next two featured authors who probably need no introduction whatsoever. Marissa Meyer is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Renegades trilogy, the Lunar Chronicles series, the Wires and Nerve graphic novels, and the Lunar Chronicles coloring book. Her first standalone novel, Heartless, was also a #1 New York Times bestseller. Marissa created and hosts a podcast called The Happy Writer, and she lives in Tacoma, Washington with her husband and their 2 daughters. Shannon Hale is the New York Times bestselling author of over 30 books, including fantasy novels The Goose Girl and Book of 1,000 Days, science fiction novel Dangerous, Newbery Honor winner Princess Academy, graphic novel memoirs Real Friends and Best Friends with Lewin Pham, and romantic comedy Austenland, now a major motion picture starring Kerry Russell. She lives in Utah with her husband and frequent collaborator, Dean Hale, their 4 remarkable children, and 2 ridiculous cats named Misty Knight and Mike Hat. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions for Marissa and Shannon. We had so many good ones, so I'm gonna go ahead and kick things off. First, could the 2 of you tell us a little bit about your upcoming projects, Instant Karma and Kind of a Big Deal? Marissa, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure. So I just start talking and then it goes to me. Is that how that works?
Yes.
We're good now? Yes. Hey, hi everybody. Cool. The magic of Zoom. Yeah, my new book, Instant Karma, is coming out in November. It is my first contemporary romance with a little bit of a magical twist. It's about a girl named Prudence who lives in this very quaint coastal town. And one night after doing karaoke with some of her best friends, she kind of magically develops this power to cast instant karma on people. And so she very happily makes use of this power, punishing, you know, the bullies and the snobs and like people who litter and are terrible drivers and all of this. However, whenever she tries to punish this one particular boy named Quint, who she cannot stand, it always ends up backfiring on her. And so over the course of one summer, Prudence and Quint both end up volunteering at a sea animal rescue center, and Prudence kind of makes it her mission to try to figure out why her powers don't work on him.
Oh, yes, that sounds awesome. I was like just way into your description. Please send it to me. My new book is it's my first YA in 5 years, so that was fun to return to. It's called Kind of a Big Deal. It's about Josie, who was kind of a big deal when she was in high school, and everybody thought she was going to become a Broadway star. She dropped out of high school early to go pursue her dreams, and it's a huge failure. And the book starts several months later, and she feels like her life has been just a huge flop. And she's gone to other states, she's being a nanny, she's just kind of hiding from the world. And she starts reading books and literally going into the books. And so she's trying to figure out how this is happening. And she's also sort of working out her issues in trying to live out her ideal fantasy in these stories. And through the course of the book, she goes into 12 different genres of book.
Oh my gosh, that also sounds amazing. I love that we have like the contemporary, but with magical twists. I can see where they paired us together for this panel. It all makes sense now.
It all is clicking together. It's like karma. What? Did I say that? Did I plug your book?
So speaking of your magical elements to it, I would love to hear you guys talk a little bit about the inspiration behind each of the books and the unique magical components that they each have. And Shannon, why don't you kick us off this time?
This is a complicated story, so I'm going to try and do it more briefly, because this book has been in the works for like 15 years, and it has taken many different forms. The initial spark just came one day when my son was like 1 year old, but when I started writing it was about 7 years ago, and I had written 6 books in 1 year, and I've never done that before, and it was a very stressful year, and I was like, I'm going to take a break from writing. I'm just going to take a month off, and I'm just going to read books and, you know, restore myself, restore the well. And I lasted about 3 days because I'm so hardwired to write that I it made me more anxious to not write than to try to take a break. So I thought, what could I write that would be very low stress, that will never sell? And I thought I had two choices. I could write a book of poetry or a spec screenplay. And I decided to write a spec screenplay. And so this idea that I'd had for many years, I wrote into a screenplay. And then after I had written into that, I thought, well, I kind of wanted to explore deeper than a screenplay would let me. So I decided to write into a novel. And I spent several years doing that, but I wrote it as an adult book. And then when I tried to sell it, everybody was super confused. And I realized it's because it doesn't have one genre to it. It's like a lot of different genres. It's essentially a musical comedy, fantasy, contemporary romance. And they're so sad. They have to put books on shelves and according to every subgenre. Like, if you want a cozy mystery, don't let there be any other kind of mystery. This is the only kind of mystery that I read, Whereas kids, in the kids section, all the books are side by side. They're not separated by genre. And I'd been writing for kids for a while, and I'd gotten used to being able to just play and have fun with storytelling. And I've forgotten that adults won't let you do that. So I decided I still really like the story, and I rewrote it into a young adult book, which is not simple at all. It's terrible. It's like the difference between knocking down an old building and building a new one is way cheaper than restoring an old building. And so writing it into a young adult book completely changed every sentence in it. And it was harder to do after having written an adult book than to start over. But I was just really fond of the story. And so I did it. And after 7 years, I have this weird, funny thing. And people have told me that it's dangerous in YA to have humor. But Marissa, yours is funny too, right? I feel so bad for teenagers. Yeah, I know.
You can't have humor. What?
Well, and what I've heard is they're only if it's written by a man, and only if it has a male protagonist can you have humor in YA. This is what people keep telling me. It's going to be a hard sell. They're preparing me. Not Macmillan's been great, not my publisher, but people are preparing me. Don't expect it to sell very well because it's funny. And girls don't know. Teenage girls don't like that. Wow, what teenage girls do you hang out with? It feels so bad for them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love humor in books, and I think that's just the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. But that's part of the fun of it, is hearing these global ideas of nobody reads that and you can't sell that, and then proving everyone wrong. I love that. What were we talking about? The inspiration for Instant Karma. Also, actually very similar to Shannon, it started ages ago. So it would have been not long after I actually first got my driver's license. So going on 20 years ago. And I hated driving on the freeway. I was, would be really scared whenever I had to drive on the freeway. And there was one day when I was driving on the freeway and freaked out and over in the slow lane, and someone came up behind me and they wanted to take the next exit, but I wasn't going fast enough for them, and they started tailgating me, and I was totally freaked out. And eventually they went around me and swerved and cut me off getting onto the exit ramp, and I just was panicking and hyperventilating and this is horrible. And then I got really mad, and it was my first incident with mild road rage, and I thought, I wish that I had the power to cast instant karma on this horrible person, and if I could, I would just snap my fingers and they would blow a tire. And I thought that would feel really great if I had that power. And then I immediately thought, you know what, I bet if I actually had that power and I actually did that, their car would probably spin out and hit someone, and someone would die, and it would be my fault. And that kind of started to grow. Or now 20 years later, that idea of having this power to cast instant karma on people, I just loved that idea. And it was very vicarious, very wish fulfillment. But at the same time, I've always felt could so easily be abused, or could so easily go wrong, for someone to think that they could do it better than the universe could do it. So that was the seed of the idea. And here we are all these years later.
And now, Marissa, this is your first rom-com, your contemporary debut. Can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to transition genres and if there are any more contemporary romances coming from you potentially in the future?
Yes, I love romantic comedy and contemporary romances. Of course, I've loved writing in all the genres that I've written in so far, but as a reader, romantic comedies is like my go-to. They're my candy books. And so I don't know, to me, it didn't feel like a strange deviation from what I've done. Obviously, all of my books that I've written so far have had a very strong romantic element. So in this case, it was just, let's really focus on that and build a story around that. And yeah, I had so much fun writing it, and I definitely will be writing more. In this world, Fortuna Beach is the name of the town that Prudence lives in. There will be at least one more book that takes place there and kind of follows one of the side characters that you meet at Instant Karma. And I have ideas for 2 or 3 more. So we will see. Hopefully readers love it and I'll get to tell all the stories.
Yay, well, we're excited to read them. And Shannon, same for you. This is your first return to YA in 5 years. Can you talk a little bit about what drew you back to YA?
So I started out in YA. So my first book was The Goose Girl, which is a YA fantasy. And I wrote a lot of YA fantasies earlier in my career. And I think part of it is if a book isn't a challenge for me, then I'm not motivated to write it. If I feel like, oh, I know how to write this book, then I'm not really interested in doing it, which is like, which is the word for causing self-pain? Is that sadomasochistic? I guess that's what I am. I don't know. It's so sad. And then so I started branching out and doing other kinds of stuff that seemed too hard for me to do. And I also had younger kids. And so I was like really interested in writing chapter books and graphic novels and things that was engaging them at that age. But as I've told you, this really took a long route. I published 3 books for adults, like Austin Land. And I thought this was going to be just another one of those, because those are more my romantic comedies or in my adult books. But it didn't. It ended up taking a different route. But I love teenagers. I think it's such an awesome, interesting time of life. And I hate how devalued teen girls especially are. I like to honor teen girls and where they are and their place in the world and their right to be a person who is growing and changing, and to allow a person that should be allowed to make mistakes and be imperfect and get messy in life and experiment and not know quite who they are and not have to be forced to figure that out yet. And so I that's a huge appeal for me for returning to YA.
So speaking of your protagonists, could the two of you, what 5 words would you use to describe your upcoming protagonists? So Josie and Prudence.
Let's see.
You want to take it first, Shannon?
5 words. Okay, so Josie is confident and insecure, like side by side. She's very talented. She's very lonely, and she's hopeful.
Prudence is an overachiever. She is judgmental. She, what the word would be? She has high expectations for people. I don't know what, we'll come up with a good adjective that matches that. She is loyal to her friends. And I'm also going to say confident. But I love, Shannon, that you said that Josie is, she's confident and
insecure.
And insecure. And I feel like that really would describe Prudence as well. She's confident when she needs to be. Like she can put on that veil when she needs to, but deeper inside, there's a lot of insecurities there.
Another question. So we also have some aspiring authors in the room. Do you guys have any tips for aspiring authors, you know, especially ones who are struggling right now with creativity and coming up with ideas during a stressful time in our life? So Shannon, why don't you take this one first?
I was going to say, boy, Marissa, if you have some, I'd love to hear them.
Or Marissa can go first. That's okay.
I could use some advice.
Oh, that's so funny. Honestly, I mean, I'm a big believer in being kind to ourselves. And right now, things are weird. And my inclination, like when we first kind of entered into the quarantine stage, and we're told to stay home, and all of the events got canceled, all of my, you know, plans and travel plans, and all of that, suddenly it felt like, okay, I have all of this free time. I should be so productive. Like I should get so much done. And I enjoy my work. And so there's definitely been days when I was able to take advantage of that extra time. But at the same time, like it's an adjustment. I have young kids at home, so figuring out what do we do with them now that they're not going to school. I don't know. I feel like do what you need to do. And if that's writing and working toward a goal, that's awesome. But if you feel like there's just too many things in your head and you can't focus, or the anxiety is getting to you, like it is okay to step back, and maybe this is a good period to be filling the well and reading books and watching movies and taking long relaxing baths, and I think that's okay too. So kind of do what you need to do for you.
Yeah, for me, I don't have extra time. I have less free time than I did before because I've got 4 kids. They're home all the time. We both have twins, right? You've got twins as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, twins.
I've got 9-year-old girls, and then I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. And my most productive time was always when they were at school. And now that's been taken away. So I have found there are certain kinds of work that I can do now, because in addition to having less time, I also there's in the back of my brain, there's always just extra worry and stress, the uncertainty of what we're going through right now. And even though I know that I'm relatively okay, I have a home, I have food, I currently have toilet paper, but still there's this, I'm worried about other people, and I'm worried about the future, and that takes up a lot of my brain. And writing is an incredibly strenuous activity, especially for me. First draft and outline, those stages take so much mental focus, and I never usually have trouble with focus. I'm usually amazing at focus, but I'm having trouble now. So but for example, my friend who is an illustrator, she has several projects she's supposed to be working on and can't seem to get herself there, but she started doing free sketching. And actually, this free sketching, after a few days, turned into an idea for a picture book that she's working on. And it's something that's bringing her joy, and it's something that her brain is letting her work on right now. And so I would say, like, if you're like me and don't want to take a break and feel good about yourself when you're producing it, it makes me feel better. It's helped me to find things that I can come at it from an angle, and I can free write, or write poetry, write something that doesn't have a due date, or just write a page of dialogue between go, just whatever you're able to capture that gives you that feeling of joy that writing and creating does. That's what's kind of working for me. I hope people who I owe things to aren't listening to this and like, no, that's not, you need to be working on what to do, Shannon. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's great advice, Shannon, and I think that's the perfect way to close things out. So thank you guys both for joining us tonight. We had such a great time, and I'm sure we will talk to you both again soon. For anyone, everyone should check out Marissa and Shannon's books that are coming this fall, Instant Karma and Kind of a Big Deal. Marissa and Shannon, thank you guys both so much.
Thank
you, Morgan. And I just want to say, it's so nice to see all your faces. And so many women who I don't have women in my home, and I really missed women. So it's like really nice to see you all, your gorgeous faces, and I feel like we had like a little friend encounter. So thanks for feeding my soul.
We'll see you guys at BookCon hopefully next year.
All right.
Bye.